Welcome everyone. My name is Danielle Weiss. I'm the Director of Transportation Initiatives here at Community Energy Association, and I'm joined by my colleague Toby Quantrell, who will be helping to facilitate this presentation with me. Who is CEA? We're a charitable nonprofit that accelerates bold action by local governments and Indigenous communities related to climate and energy. We've been doing this work for over 30 years and have our roots in BC, but have extended our scope across the country nowadays. Of course, you're here for the carbon credits discussion. This event is generated by the feedback we received at our different Fleet Forward events over the fall, where we were talking to folks in person about the opportunity for medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicles. And the opportunity to create carbon credits was news to some folks, and the potential revenue they can bring alongside any type of electric vehicle adoption is something that we wanted to explain and run through. So we're going to explain the carbon credits. We're going to talk about the markets. We're going to look at the um, Navius research. We're going to be joined by folks from Navius. We're going to talk about the future of the markets and current forecasting. We're going to be enlightened by some case studies from the City of Victoria and RR Platt Trucking, and then we'll have additional questions and wrap up. I would encourage folks to ask questions throughout the presentation. We're hoping to have more of a conversation and less of a speaking to. So over to you, Toby.
Great. Thank you, Danielle. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see everyone here. So as Danielle explained, this is just really an introduction to carbon credits. So we're going to start, excuse me, with the basics. What is a carbon credit? So a carbon credit can be defined as any project that reduces greenhouse gas emissions. So in the various programs we're going to discuss today, they set out criteria and guidance specifying the carbon intensity and the emissions reductions goals. And if you operate within those guidelines, then you can generate carbon credits. And the carbon credit is equal to the removal of 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide. The introduction of carbon credits are really to put a financial value on reducing pollution by having this monetary incentive. It's a real good opportunity for cleaner choices, and the money you can generate through the sale of carbon credits can then be reinvested into further zero emission projects. So some examples of the typical pathways that you would to generate carbon credits would be switching from diesel or gas to electric vehicles, or supplying low carbon fuels. So that could be ethanol, biodiesel, amongst others. And within the carbon credit spectrum, there are organizations that verify the projects to make sure the emissions reductions are measurable and real. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here in BC, the Provincial Low Carbon Fuel Standards is a program that organizations would typically enroll in to generate and sell their carbon credits. So this program has been around for quite a while. It began in 2010 in a slightly different format to the program we see today. So the program we see today was introduced in 2024 with the updated Low Carbon Fuels Act. So this set out some updated criteria, including the emissions reductions targets. The Act has a rule that transportation fuels must get cleaner over time, which is the lower carbon intensity. And by measuring carbon intensity, we can measure how much greenhouse gas is created per unit of fuel used. And that goes from production all the way to use. And with the LCFS program, credits are generated on an annual basis. So you would report and record all your EV charging data, for example, from January till December. And then you would have until March the 31st the following year to generate the credits. And the credit generation occurs in the provincial portal. So, for example, electricity used in electric vehicle charging has a very low carbon intensity. So by utilizing EV chargers, recording that data, you can then generate credits which would offset diesel or gasoline use. But obviously you've chosen a sustainable alternative. And through that, you would generate a tradable commodity. Are there any questions about the LCFS program in particular? Okay, don't hear any. We can move on to the next slide. Perfect. So in Canada, as well as the BC program, there is a federal Canada-wide clean fuel regulations program. So this operates in a similar way to the BC program, except it's offered to organizations across the country. So in the Clean Fuel Regulations Program, it began in 2023, and it replaced an existing program called the Renewable Fuels Regulations. So primary suppliers of gasoline and diesel have different options to meet their targets, and they can improve the carbon intensity of their fuel production in exchange for compliance credits. One of the main differences with the provincial and federal programs is that the federal program generates credits on a quarterly basis. So you have to do, I guess, a bit more intensive reporting. You can't wait until the next calendar year. It has to be every 3 months. And then the organizations who exceed the emissions targets create a deficit. And with that deficit, they must purchase credits to offset the emissions, the extra emissions that they've used compared to the target emissions reductions. So that's the clean fuel regulations. Are there any questions on that before we move on to the markets? Okay, thank you. So in the LCFS market, it's a great opportunity to earn additional revenue for your organization through EV charging infrastructure. When you have generated your credits, they're held within the provincial portal online, and they had some webinars recently about the updates to that system. So they're keen to make it as streamlined and as easy as possible to ensure that as many organizations can generate credits as possible. So within that portal, you can list how many credits you have if you're looking to sell them, and then people can contact you to purchase them through that way. With the LCFS market, if you have generated credits but you're not sure how to go all the way down to selling them, you can contact a third-party aggregator. So an aggregator would be someone who comes in, they they take credits from you through an agreement, and then they pool them together with other organizations' credits, and then they would sell them in one large transaction. So the advantage of having a credit aggregator is that for a small or medium municipality, for example, if they only have 50 to 100 credits, that might not be enough to attract a buyer through the carbon credit market. But by having an aggregator come and pool the credits together, they might solicit some higher value bids just because there's a larger volume of credits, and therefore it's a more attractive proposition. So the LCFS market is you can sell the credits all year round as well. Okay, not hearing any questions, we can move on. Thank you. So in terms of the CFR market, once again, it's quite similar. You generate, except for generating on a quarterly basis. And the credits are calculated using the life cycle intensity, which is set out within the guidelines for the CFR program. One of the differences with the CFR market is that third-party verification can occur if there's a large volume of credits being generated, just to make sure that everything has been generated correctly within the guidelines of the program. And then you can trade your credits with registered buyers, which are primarily fossil fuel suppliers, as we mentioned earlier. So to summarize there, the difference with the markets. The CFR, you can also import blended fuels to offset your emissions in terms of having a deficit. And there is a different reporting timeline of quarterly versus annual. So that was just a quick rundown, and now we're going to hear from Navius Research, who analyze carbon credit markets and can give us some more insight.
Thanks, Toby. Yeah, Aurora, we'll pass it over to you. You should be able to share your screen.
Okay, excellent. So my name is Aurora Marstock. I am a project manager at Navius. One of my key responsibilities at the company is that I lead our quarterly CFR and BC LCFS market outlook, where we analyze where credit prices and credit compliance is headed over the next few years. I'm also joined by Michael Wolonitz, who is one of our partners. He'll be available to support during the Q&A portion. So before I jump into the presentation, I just want to provide a brief introduction to Navies for those of you who are not familiar with us. So we're a Vancouver-based consulting firm that uses energy economy models to analyze the impact of climate and energy policies like the CFR and the LCFS. And a lot of industry in Canada rely on our credit market outlook for their decision making. So that includes refineries, mining companies, and utilities. But we also work with a range of different clients across the country on other topics, including other climate and energy policies or questions related to the Canadian energy system as a whole. So over the next 8 minutes or so, I will walk you through a little bit of additional policy background with a focus on how EVs can actually generate credits in these systems. I'll provide a brief overview of our model and why it is a good tool for simulating and forecasting these markets. Then I have some key insights to share based on our modeling for how you can expect these markets to evolve over the next few years. And then lastly, I just want to let you know about our market outlook if you're interested in knowing more about these markets. So the CFR, like we just talked about, it provides a market for trading compliance credits. There's many ways to generate credits in this policy, but one way is through battery electric vehicles. EVs can generate credits through what's called compliance category 3, called end-use fuel switching. And the amount of credits generated per vehicle is a function of, first of all, the energy supplied to the vehicle. So how much electricity is that vehicle consuming? Secondly, the carbon intensity of electricity compared to the reference. So for example, a vehicle charged in BC will earn more credits than a vehicle charged in another province that has a dirtier electricity grid, for example, one that's primarily powered through natural gas or coal. The crediting mechanism also recognizes the fact that EVs are more efficient than conventional internal combustion engine vehicles, so that's also taken into account in the credit calculation. ECCC has stated that credit generation from home charging is going to be phased out after 2030, but that other EV credits will remain in place. The BC LCFS credit generation is a function of virtually similar things there. So again, the amount of energy supplied to the vehicle, the assessed carbon intensity of that electricity you're using to power the vehicle, and then as well, there's kind of a benefit of EVs being more energy efficient, and there's no plans to phase out credits from EVs in the system. That's just a brief overview of those two policies. The price and compliance for these markets is very uncertain. This is driven by the fact that there are many ways to comply with these policies. And like we talked about, there's also, you can generate credits under both the CFR and the LCFS with the same action. So these two policies overlap with each other, they interact with each other, but they also interact with other climate and energy policies in Canada as well, like the zero emission vehicle mandate. And so this poses a significant challenge in trying to anticipate how the credit market will evolve. But using our modeling tools, we can capture all these uncertainties and interactions and deliver forecasts for these markets. And so Navius's tools provides an internally consistent framework to examine these markets and its interaction with other policies. And I do just want to highlight the importance of having an internally consistent frameworks, because oftentimes forecasts may come from models that assume a certain price or a certain fuel demand, but Navius's model endogenously calculates all these things. So the model simulates the price. It is a model result. And we have a strong track record in predicting the future credit price for these markets. Here's just one example. This is the 2023 CFR credit price. And so before ECCC released any of their compliance data, we were already predicting the credit price within 3% of what the price ended up being. So with that, I will outline some of the key insights that have come out of our modeling over the past few years. Firstly, in the near term, the CFR credit price is set by the relative price difference between diesel and renewable diesel. So our analysis finds that the marginal abatement action available to meet the policy's carbon intensity standard is renewable diesel. The price difference is primarily driven by the spread between crude oil and oilseeds prices. So a larger spread, which means a lower cost crude oil and a higher cost oilseed, would result in a larger CFR credit price. The CFR could provide a significant revenue stream and incentive for fleet electrification. For example, with a CFR credit price of, let's say, $300, a light-duty vehicle that consumes 3,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per year could generate a revenue of over 1.1K per year. The BC LCFS does provide an additional revenue stream. However, we are expecting BC LCFS credit prices to continue declining over time. There has been a decline in recent years, and we are only expecting that to continue. The reason for this is that there is an inverse relationship between the CFR price and the BC LCFS price. And so while the CFR credit price is set by the cost of blending renewable fuel in Canada, like I just outlined, the BC LCFS price, now that the CFR has been priced into the market, it's set by just the incremental cost of blending that renewable fuel in BC compared to the rest of the country. So we're really expecting most of the revenue potential to be in the CFR market moving forward. Absent any further tightening of the CFR and the BC LCFS, so without these policies becoming more stringent, we're expecting that the CFR and LCFS credit price would start declining by the early 2030s. This is because credit generation from EVs will continue to grow over time as vehicle stock turns over, and that reduces the demand for liquid renewable fuels. And so lower demand translates to falling fuel prices, which in turn lowers that combined credit price. And last insight I'll outline here as well is that the CFR and the LCFS credit price interact heavily with many other Canadian climate policies. I already touched on this, but I just wanted to mention it again. One example is if the federal government decides to repeal the zero emission vehicle mandate fully, and that results in fewer light duty zero emission vehicles in Canada and less compliance generated from electricity, that could partially counteract the decrease in the combined CFR and LCFS credit prices expected near the end of the decade. And the last thing I'll say here before I pass it back to Danielle and Toby is just that I want to highlight that we do have a quarterly CFR and LCFS market outlook. So if you're interested in learning more about the CFR market, please do reach out to us. We provide forecasts of credit prices and compliance by type. My email is here if you have any questions or comments that you don't get through during the presentation. Feel free to reach out to me. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Danielle.
Oh, thanks, Aurora. I imagine your comments may have elicited a few questions. So one that I'll start with, just to reiterate, the outlook for LCFS would only change if there was some policy change enacted, or is it too inversely related to CFR that it would never have a positive outlook again?
I think that based on the analysis we've done so far, it's pretty safe to say that unless the CFR price declines significantly, we're expecting those LCFS prices to remain low. So if the CFR is repealed, or if there's other policies in Canada that interact with the CFR to reduce that price significantly, we could see an increase. But really, we are expecting that price to continue declining and to stay low through the end of the decade.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. And that scenario where you saw um us suggesting out to early 2030 that the credit market would kind of come to a close. Is that like a high EV adoption scenario, mid, low? Would is there
It's Yeah, sorry, it's a good question. So that's kind of our reference assumption scenario. But even with we've simulated scenarios where we are not implementing a zero emission vehicle mandate in the model, which means there are less vehicle like EVs adopted. There will still be some because our model kind of simulates that stock turnover, and we are seeing increased adoptions in EVs. And so as there's more EVs in the market, we are expecting that price to decline. Even in scenarios where we have the zero emission vehicle mandate repealed, we have seen some decreases in price. I think the main thing to keep in mind here is that there's been no announcements by either ECCC or the BC government regarding stringency increases in these policies post 2030. And so, of course, when we model this without increasing the stringency further, we're going to see these markets start declining. Whereas in reality, it's likely that ECCC or Emily would come out and increase the stringency of these policies. But the increase in EVs that we're likely to see, regardless of whether we have a ZEV mandate or not, it is a threat to that credit price because these vehicles generate credits, and as there's more of them, there's just an oversupply of credits in the market.
I might just jump in there, and we're often thinking about light duty vehicles, but a bit of a wild card here is the medium and heavy duty vehicle space and the electrification of those vehicles. And a zero emissions heavy duty vehicle uses a lot of fuel. It generates a lot of credits. And in sort of the post 2035 times when we are even absent sales mandates, we are expecting an acceleration of the adoption of those vehicles. So that market shift alone poses a threat to the credit price. Again, in this world where the policy remains static, where the regulators don't do something to try to maintain the bite of the policy over the long term.
awesome? Thanks for that. There's one question in the chat that I would point you both to. Public sector organizations have to purchase offsets for carbon emissions since the price difference from what is paid versus what can be reclaimed is significant. Is it possible to claim these offsets without double dipping?
Mike, do you want to
I'm
take
not
that
sure I
one?
quite understand the question. I'm just reading it again here. So
Maybe Ben, you want to come off mute and just expand a bit further?
Yeah, I can come off mute.
Thanks.
With the zero emission vehicles, if they're purchased for our fleet,
yeah,
they're automatically going to be offsetting our fleet fuel emissions that we are mandated to report on.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
there a way to break that out so that, say, we still pay the $25 for the emissions, but then claim the offset at the $100 per emission or per offset?
So let me get this straight. So you are required to reduce your corporate emissions or your fleet emissions. Um, and then the question is, can be even if you're required, can that still count towards, are you saying count towards like the BCLCFS and the CFR or some other offset program?
Yeah, is there a way to shift it out so we're not double dipping? Because essentially we are mandated to be net zero,
Yeah.
so we are paying on it regardless. But if we have, let's just say, 100 tons of offsets, that'll be $250 we'd have to pay for it. But if we sell the 100 tons on that open market, like you're talking about, we could cash back $1,000. There'd be a 4-to-1 return,
Right.
making fleet electrification more profitable.
Yeah, like I think if your fleet vehicles are electrified and you manage their charging, you will own those credits and you can sell them and claim that economic value regardless of whether you are also required to reduce those emissions otherwise. And this sort of gets back to what Aurora said, is that the BCLCFS and the CFR, in fact, interact with a lot of different policies across Canada. And we're often thinking at the, kind of the federal, provincial level, things that are regulating transportation emissions. But what you're pointing to is that they interact with requirements of municipalities as well to be heading towards net zero. But yeah, no, as far as I understand, if you do something in order to reduce municipal corporate emissions because you have that requirement, you can still sell those credits on the LCFS or CFR market.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Any other questions from the floor before we dive into some case studies? Okay. Seeing or hearing none, we'll move ahead. We're going to call on Steve Young from the City of Victoria to talk about their experience with carbon credits and how it's supporting their future adoption. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Danielle. Hi, everyone. As Danielle said, I'm Steve Young. I'm part of the City of Victoria's Climate Action Programme, and I also support the rollout of our fleet and public EV infrastructure. So currently the City of Victoria has about 350 on-road vehicles in its fleet. About 75 of those are medium and heavy duty vehicles. We first heard about low carbon fuel credits when they came out. I think the legislation came out in 2008, and people could start generating from around 2013. At that time, we operated a CNG station, which is also a low carbon fuel. And so that was kind of our introduction. We generated a few credits using our CNG station, and then we started to install EV charging infrastructure and some light duty vehicles and added to that credit pool. We didn't really know what to do with them at the time. So we just let them accumulate for until about 2021. And at that point, we signed with an agent who was called Brightside at that time. Today they trade as a new. And so that was our introduction to aggregators and trading on the LCF market. Since then, our electrification has advanced, and as has our public charging initiative. So we now have about 350 chargers in operation. About 100 of those chargers are supporting our EVs. We have now approximately 100 EVs in operation, including some medium and heavy duty vehicles. So we've got a fire truck, almost actually 2 fire trucks by the end of this quarter, a tractor unit, and I think 5 or 6 line trucks. So, and then the bulk of our other EVs are light duty vehicles, so F-150s, saloons, etc. And then on the public side, we have about 250 level 2 chargers in operation. So in terms of what that means for us in generating credits, we're currently generating something over 500 credits a year, and in 2026, we anticipate our credit generation will be closer to 1,000 LCF credits. This was very exciting for us when we first learned about the value of the credits. So when we first entered the market, credits were trading about $450 per credit, and that really influenced some of our policies. We used it to support our transition to EVs, and we also used it to help set prices for our public charging. So we kept our rates low to encourage people to use it and therefore to adopt EVs. So it affected us both in terms of our operations and our community-focused policy direction. Since then, as you've heard, the LCF credit price has dropped quite substantially, and it sounds like we may not expect to see it rise up to those levels again in future with the introduction of the CFS. We did look at joining the CFS, so the Federal Clean Fuel Credit System, in 2022, I believe, when it was introduced. I will say the administrative burden and the verification piece was really quite onerous, and it didn't make sense for us to join at that time. We just weren't generating enough credits for it to be worthwhile. That situation has changed in twofold. One is that the CFS credits are now a lot more valuable. I understand they're about $390 a credit, as opposed to, I think, maybe 100 when they were first introduced. And yeah, our fleet has expanded quite a bit since then. So we're a larger volume, potentially a larger volume producer. And so, yeah, we're really looking at a strategy moving forward where we have got our foot in both camps. So we're generating LCF credits and CFR credits so that we're kind of positioned to whatever the market brings to us, and so that we can maximize the credit revenue as we go forward. Is just to give you a sense of what it means on a unit basis. Aurora did kind of mention 1.1 thousand in revenue a year for us. For our CNG contract, for the 6 trucks, refuse trucks that we operate on CNG, we estimated we would actually offset almost all the fuel costs from fueling those in credit generation. So essentially almost fuel price free. So yeah, it was quite some nice boost to your operating costs if you can make it work. And I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions for Steve? One that I have is the value that you've generated from your credits. What has it contributed to as like next steps? Did you end up purchasing more infrastructure, more vehicles, neither, both, something else?
Yeah, we initially, with the credits that we accumulated from the CNG station, we used it to purchase some medium duty EVs. And then ongoing, it's supporting the operations of our EV network. There are some restrictions with the CFR. So for municipalities that are operating public charging, if you're able to collect those credits, which isn't necessarily a given, you have to reinvest that in EV infrastructure, but your fleet credits, you're allowed to invest more widely. We're not collecting those at the moment, so that discussion hasn't happened. But generally, we use our LCF credits to support the expansion of our network and potentially other climate action.
Thanks. And now that you're in the CFR market, is the administrative burden still there?
Oh, we're not in the CFR market yet. We're hoping to get into it this year. This is our
Okay.
plan.
Okay, fair enough. So no comment on that. But not much has changed from what I understand from original launch. Okay, anyone else have a question for Steve? You can raise your virtual hand, come off mute, throw it in the chat.
I'm coming off mute. I can't find my raise hand button.
Okay, go for it.
Michael, oh, there we go. My video is on. Michael Wallenitz from Navius. Just a question for Steve. And I know you said you're not in the CFR market yet, and you also alluded to the fact that revenues generated from EV credits under that policy have to be reinvested in making charging infrastructure, charging itself, or electric vehicles more affordable. Do you know for a local government, does that mean like you could subsidize your own fleet purchases if there were other zero emissions vehicles? Like what counts for how you use that revenue if you've gotten into that yet? Or is that part of the administrative burden that you mentioned?
That's part of the research question that we need to
Yeah.
get answered as well before. We've got various options in participating in the CFR market. We can either go through an aggregator, in which case a lot of that administrative burden falls to them, and they're the ones that have to satisfy the requirements, and we basically receive the check, or we can enter as an independent party, in which case, yeah, the onus falls on us to fully understand. And then, of course, it becomes more of a resource burden for a municipality, and it's not insignificant, as you're likely aware. So, so that's where we're at in terms of decision-making process. Are we going to essentially farm out our CFR obligations and allow others to do the verification? Well, we'd be others regardless, but the verification and administration, or would we bring it in-house?
Thank
But
you.
at the moment, it seems most likely we would do it outside, just because it's quite onerous compared to LCFS.
Yep.
The other thing I'll add is that we're interested in looking at collaborating with other municipalities and potentially becoming aggregating our CFR and potentially apportioning out some of those costs as well. So if that's something that might be of interest, please reach out to me.
Yeah, and I'll flag that CA, we created a aggregator service for several of the local governments across British Columbia at their request and interest. And so we traded on the LCFS market this past year. Given what Navius has shared today, there's an opportunity perhaps to look into the CFR market, but we'd need substantial interest from folks to be able to do that. So again, yeah, reach out if there's any interest. We can pool our efforts with Steve or go with whatever path forward makes the most sense. But just flagging that. Okay, thank you very much, Steve. We're going to have a presentation now from Trevor, I believe, at Plet Trucking. I just wanted to remind folks that what we just heard from Steve was from a local government perspective. City of Victoria would be considered, a medium-sized business. So we're going to talk a bit more now about a private sector initiative. And I'll leave it to Trevor to comment as to what size business you might represent. But I'll get the screen share going and you can continue to introduce yourself, Trevor.
Sounds good. Hi, everybody. My name is Trevor. I'm one of the managers at Plet Trucking. And we've started the process to electrify a portion of our fleet. Currently, we're operating about 120 Class 8 trucks in Vancouver, and have started to electrify the local portion of that fleet, which is about 30 trucks. It is running locally in Vancouver, and we have converted 8 of those over to a Class 8 Volvo VNR electric vehicles, and also 2 Class 5-ton electrics as well. You can go to the next slide, Daniel. Yeah, so currently, 7 Class 8 electric trucks. There's a picture of one of them there. So we have 2 years of experience so far with the first couple, and slowly been adding them on as we found it more feasible for the operation. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so our goal would be to eventually have 100% of our local fleet on a battery electric model. 2030 is pretty aggressive, maybe, but that's the goal. We've been adding about 3 to 4 per year. So so far so good. We have a lot of support from government, which is why we have started this and made it feasible with both Plug NBC grants as well as the federal IM ZEV grant. Also, the Port of Vancouver is pushing for the fleets that service their terminals to at least start this process. We are one of the first to start going down this road. But yeah, it's going well. You can go to the next slide. So we use an aggregator called 3 Degrees for our carbon credit monetization, which has worked well. Being a little bit new to us, carbon credits can be a little bit tricky to get your head around how to make that work for your business. 3 Degrees made it pretty easy for us to monetize those credits. Maybe just a rough outline of what we're anticipating for this year is roughly 720 megawatts of power to power the electric fleet, which should generate roughly 1,200 CFR credits and 680 LCFS credits. Can give you a rough idea, but that carbon credits can help us continue to reinvest into our electric fleet, and also bring that operating or cost of ownership for those vehicles down. We have the savings on the fuel as well, which is substantial, but then on top of the fuel savings we have the carbon credit monetization, and also the maintenance on electric vehicles is substantially less as well. No oil changes are required, less moving parts. They are new vehicles, so we anticipate as we get into years 3, 4, 5, 6 that may change, but so far it's been very smooth. I can go to the next slide, Daniel. Also in our space, in logistics, a lot of the multinational companies that we are working with are demanding some kind of a initiative from their partners to move to electric. So not only is government pushing for this, but also our customers as well. So they want to work with carriers that are thinking about moving to a emission-free solution. So that gives us an advantage in the market. At this time, we're only transitioning our local fleet just because battery electric is not quite ready for servicing our long haul lanes into Winnipeg or Alberta. But as technology advances over the next few years, we will look at that again. I can go to the next slide. Yeah, that's it. It's just a quick outline of what we're doing and kind of how that is working for us.
Thanks, Trevor. You spoke to the operational cost savings on the fuel and then the carbon credit monetization. Do you have any quantifiable metrics that you're interested in sharing with the group, or your cost savings,
Yeah, per vehicle fuel savings maybe is roughly $4,000 a month. Roughly, it depends on the price of fuel and utilization of the asset. And yeah, that goes up and down, but $4,000 a month per vehicle is substantial. And then yeah, carbon credits can be 4,000 a month maybe, depending on usage as well.
Nice. So like a significant you're not costing fuel, and then you're making the equivalent of your fuel costs back in carbon credit. So
yeah,
coming out.
roughly. Yeah. But I mean, these vehicles cost over $600,000 per vehicle. So we need to have those savings to afford the heavy investment into the product, right?
Yeah, of course. Aurora, I see have your hand up. Or maybe it's not Aurora because you guys were both logged in with the same account.
Yeah, I think it's Michael. I'm not sure how
Okay.
that happened, but Trevor, you mentioned you're hoping to get to 100%, or the goal is 100% drayage vehicles being zero emissions by 2030. What do you see as the biggest barrier to achieving that?
Probably charging infrastructure. We're working with BC Hydro now on a phase 2 installation to our site of another 1.5 megawatt service. if that goes through, which it should, I think that the local fleet of 30 vehicles should be close to being able to be serviced by our current infrastructure plus this phase two.
And if it's not too much to share, I'm just curious, like who bears the cost of, adding that extra 1.5 megawatts of service? Is that BC Hydro and then they recuperate it through rates, or is that you? And
Um, BC Hydro would work with us to put that installation through. I mean, I think currently there's a lot of government support to increase the charging infrastructure in BC. So I believe the rebate coverage should be around the 75% of the project. The project is going to be around $1 million. So I mean, there's still a portion that we'll be covering, but right now the BC Hydro is wanting us to move forward, and of course they will recover that in fees, over the long term.
Yeah. Thanks.
I'll just flag a comment in the chat, Trevor, more about the vehicle. It was that the specs of the Windrose and Tesla semis appear to have better specs than the Volvos you were using. Do you have any reflections on those other vehicles?
Yeah, we are. This next phase two is a Tesla semi project. We've had reservations to purchase Tesla semis since they first came out. It was 8 years ago, maybe now. But yeah, that's the plan moving forward, to move away from the Volvo and
Oh, I think we have a frozen screen, or am I frozen?
Yeah, no, I hear you. It was Trevor, I
Okay,
think.
good. Okay. Are you back, Trevor? We just lost you for a second.
yeah, I'm here.
Okay, your screen just froze for a second. So I think you just wrapped up with you plan to use a Tesla as part of your next project.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Madise and then Kevin with the questions.
Yeah, my question, Trevor, is more around how easy it was to deal with BC Hydro or install chargers. Did you have enough electrical capacity at your site/sites? And if you didn't, did you have to go through a service upgrade at all?
Fortunately, our current site had a lot of heavy power that we were not utilizing. So we were able to install 5 DC fast chargers without having to increase our service. So it's just a matter of getting the local permitting to get those done. So it was quite easy for us. I think we were very lucky and fortunate that we already had that in place. And it kind of helped us make that decision to jump into EV vehicles because we already had the power available, and it was going to be less cost up front to get that first charger installed.
Awesome. Go ahead, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin from the city of Vernon. My questions aren't for Trevor specifically.
That's okay.
Toby had commented in the chat that the EV chargers have to be on a separate meter from your building. I just wanted to confirm that because wouldn't the charger, can you pull your kilowatt hour consumption from the charging unit?
Yes,
So that's
but
one question.
yeah, but you just have to make sure that the charger you utilize is able to measure it independently, because there are some charging units that don't have that feature. They're older and probably less in service these days, but they would have just been tied to your building use and you wouldn't have been able to discern between what went into the building and what went to the charger. So as long as there's some sort of meter involved, then yeah, you're okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my other question was about the aggregation service that CEA provides. Is that ongoing, open? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. Toby, maybe you want to throw the link in the chat, but yeah, it's open. It's a pilot project. We just completed our first year. And so we have aggregated a couple thousands of credits, and so have taken those to the market. As Toby noted in the chat, a couple thousand was enough to get some interest from purchasers, but the higher the volume, always the better. So more aggregation and more interest would be helpful. But yeah, he'll show the link in the chat, and we can always follow up after, Kevin, and anyone else who's interested.
Thank
We
you.
are with 5 minutes left, so it is time for general questions, and then I'll wrap up. Any other questions or comments from the floor? Anyone else want to share anything? Doesn't just have to be the scheduled speakers. Yeah, go ahead, Madise.
I have a question for Steve because I think I understood that City of Victoria is actually doing their own LCFS registration and selling on the market. So I just was curious how much work that entails and if you found that process to be user friendly. And would you suggest that to other municipalities or organizations to do it independently, or would you, now having experienced it, would you rather have passed on that sort of administrative burden to an aggregator?
Yeah. Just to clarify, thanks for the question. Yeah, just to clarify, we do manage our own credits from the point of view of meeting the provincial requirements, but as far as selling, we use an aggregator service as well. So we don't take our credits out to individually out to tender, and that's for the reasons that Danielle alluded to. We're not a big enough aggregator to believe we don't generate enough credits to believe that we'd get a good price on the market, and that just reflects the people in the market that are buying the credits. It's big oil essentially that's buying, so they're putting many millions of litres of fuel into BC, and so they're looking to purchase on a large scale. But in terms of the provincial platform, yeah, there's a little bit of a learning curve to it, but it's quite easy to use. Definitely in terms of using smart EV chargers, so chargers that log power that's used. But yeah, there's a little bit of a setup required, but most EV suppliers, manufacturers, CPOs understand the requirements now and support that. And some will even offer to trade your credits as well. The one caution I would put there is that there's quite a lot of discrepancy in terms of commission and things like that for trading. So it's worthwhile to have a look at the fine print in terms of the services that you might use.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. We're almost at the hour, so we're gonna wrap up. Trevor, I'll just flag there's one question for you in the chat if you could take a look in closing. So thanks everyone for coming today. Thanks for our panelists and for all of you attending and contributing. This event, as I mentioned at the onset, was a follow-up to our province-wide programming that will continue for another year around creating awareness and understanding of the opportunity of medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicles into your fleets. So if anyone wants to talk about that or has any ideas on the programming for the next year, we welcome any input. And any further questions about today or that can be sent to Toby. I just threw his email in the chat. And in closing, we will share the presentation and the webinar, so you'll get a follow-up email from Eventbrite. So take care and have a great Thursday. Thanks.
Thanks, Danielle
Thank
and
you.
Toby and everyone else.
See ya.